We are living in an age where history is no longer the past. It is being rewritten, or more accurately, it is being reenacted. And at the center of this stage stands Donald Trump, a man who understands, perhaps better than any historian or statesman, that true power no longer flows from the cold mechanics of politics. It flows from the white-hot furnace of belief. This is the fundamental rupture of the 21st century. We were taught that history was a linear progression, a series of settled facts cataloged in dusty books. We believed that institutions were the bedrock, that precedent was the guardrail, and that reality was a shared consensus. But we were wrong. We mistook the theater for the foundation. History, it turns out, is not a static record. It is a live performance. It is a story we must choose to tell ourselves over and over, every single day. The great conflicts we thought were resolved, battles over identity, over truth, over the very definition of the nation, were merely at intermission. The ghosts we were assured were banished have returned, not as faint apparitions, but as lead actors demanding their turn in the spotlight. And what a spotlight it is. Into this flickering, uncertain light stepped the protagonist who defines the era. Donald Trump did not emerge from the hallowed halls of political theory. He emerged from the broadcast booth, the boardroom, and the reality television set. He did not study the established script of governance. He studied the audience. He understood that in a world saturated with information, the only thing that truly matters is attention. The only currency with any value is narrative. While his opponents debated policy points in empty auditoriums, he was crafting a mythology. While they cited statutes and procedures, he was building a cathedral of belief. He recognized that modern society was not starving for data. It was starving for a story. It was desperate for a plot, for clear heroes and visceral villains, for a sense of drama that made life feel significant again. He offered them one. This is the source of his unique and baffling resilience. To his allies, he is not a mere politician to be supported. He is a narrative to be inhabited. To his detractors, he is not a mere opponent to be defeated. He is a fundamental violation of the reality they thought was immutable. The conflict is no longer between left and right, but between a world that believes in institutions and a world that believes in the man. This power, derived from belief, operates outside the traditional laws of political gravity. It does not require legislative victories. It is immune to factual correction, shrugs off scandals that would have vaporized any conventional figure. Why? Because when you are challenging a story, a contradictory fact is useless. The only thing that can challenge a story is a better story. The stage is now set for the great reenactment. The questions of the past are again the questions of the present. What is a nation? What is truth? What holds a people together? Is it laws or is it a shared collective dream? The curtain is rising. The audience is holding its breath. And the script is being improvised line by line by the one man who understood that the presidency was not the highest office in the land. It was the greatest show on earth. Part 2. The Faith. Voted Donald Trump does not just ask for votes. He asks for faith. This is the pivot upon which his entire political universe turns, transforming a campaign from a civic exercise into a moral crusade. In the theater of his recent events, he has distilled this crusade into a powerful, three-part litany. We need God, we need borders, and we need law. This is not a policy proposal. It is a creed. It is a message that is as political as it is theological, designed to resonate not with the rational mind, but with the anxious soul of a nation that feels it has lost its way. Let us deconstruct this creed. First, we need God. This is the foundation. This invocation is not the polite civic deism of past presidents. It is an urgent, almost apocalyptic cry. It frames the political struggle as a spiritual one, a battle between the righteous and the damned, the sacred and the profane. By placing God first, he positions himself not merely as a political candidate, but as a vessel, a flawed human agent chosen by a higher power to restore a divine order. His supporters are thus not just voters. They are a congregation. They are the remnant tasked with saving the nation's soul. Second, we need borders. This is the physical manifestation of the spiritual claim. If the nation is a sacred body, the border is its skin. It is the line that separates the sanctuary from the wilderness, the us from the them. The border, in this new theology, is not just a line on a map. It is a profound moral and existential statement. It is the wall of the temple, and to leave it open is to allow the profane to overrun the sacred. It is the physical defense of a cultural and spiritual identity that perceives itself to be under existential siege. Third, we need law. This is the sword. After establishing the divine mandate, God, and the physical territory, borders, law becomes the instrument of enforcement. But it is a selective righteous law. It is the tool used to protect the faithful and to smite the wicked. It is the mechanism for imposing order upon a world seen as descending into chaos. It is not the law of complex procedures or nuanced interpretations. It is the law of swift judgment and moral clarity, the kind that protects the congregation and casts out the unbelievers. This is what observers have begun to call the new religious politics. It is a faith that serves as both a shield and a spear. As a shield, it makes its adherents invulnerable. When the leader is attacked by the media, by prosecutors, or by political opponents, these are not seen as legitimate criticisms. They are seen as the trials of a martyr, the attacks of the secular demons trying to stop the divine work. Faith becomes a shield that deflects any fact, any scandal, any contradiction. To question the leader is to question God's plan. As a spear, it is an offensive weapon. This is not a passive live and let live faith. It is an assertive, muscular evangelism aimed at retaking territory. It seeks to reclaim the public square, to re-infuse institutions with its own moral doctrine, and to wage a holy war against the cultural forces it holds responsible for the nation's decay. The goal is not coexistence. It is restoration. The political rally then transforms. It is no longer just a stump speech. It is a revival meeting. It is a place of communion where the shared belief is renewed, where the litany is recited, and where the faithful are charged with the mission of taking their country back. The message is simple, potent, and absolute. The fight is not just for political power, but for eternal stakes. Part 3, Power and Piety. The Perilous Marriage. This fusion of the sacred and the state finds its most alarming expression in the language of force. When Donald Trump says, "If I have to, I'll deploy even more than the National Guard into the cities," it is not merely a promise of security. It is the sound of the spear being sharpened. These words, and others like them, trigger a profound unease, raising the critical question of our time. Is religion now being used to legitimize the raw, coercive power of the state? This is the perilous marriage. It is a union where the temporal power of the government, its police, its military, its mechanisms of enforcement, is sanctified, wrapped in the holy mantle of a divine mission. The deployment of the National Guard is no longer just a legal or political decision. It is reframed as an act of restoration, a righteous cleansing of the temple. This is where the salvation-filled speeches become so potent. The promises to bring God back to America are not abstract spiritual goals. They are the justification for concrete political action. They create a powerful symbiotic loop. The leader's authority is legitimized by the faith of the people, and the leader then uses that authority to promise the protection of that faith. For many, this loop is not a threat. It is a profound comfort. It makes them believe that Trump is, in fact, the chosen one. Not a messiah in the classical sense, not a perfect man, but a divinely appointed instrument. A King Cyrus figure, a secular ruler used by God to save his people from a godless culture. This belief is the ultimate political force multiplier. It elevates the leader above the realm of mere politics and into the realm of prophecy. He is no longer just a president. He is a defender of the faith. His actions are not to be judged by the sterile standards of policy, but by the passionate standards of a holy war. But this is precisely where the critical boundary begins to blur, and where the question must be asked, when faith becomes the primary tool for the centralization of power, where is the line between belief and control? If the state can justify deploying troops in the streets by claiming it is doing God's work, what check remains on that power? The traditional constraints of democracy, oversight, public debate, the rule of law, risk being swept aside, dismissed as the profane obstructions of the faithless. This is the true danger of the marriage between absolute power and absolute piety. It creates a closed system. The faith justifies the power, and the power protects the faith. In this system, dissent is not just political disagreement. It is heresy. Opposition is not just a civic right. It is a spiritual sin. The state, once sanctified, no longer needs to answer to the people. It must only answer to its mission. And when that mission is defined as the restoration of God's kingdom on earth, any action, no matter how forceful, can be deemed necessary. Part 4. The Genesis of MAGA Faith. The perilous marriage of power and piety discussed in Part 3 has now fully consummated, giving birth to something new and startling, a distinct and tangible religious movement. This is the genesis of what can only be called MAGA faith. This is not a metaphor. It is an observable reality. Observers, such as those at Vox, have documented how millions of Americans are actively forming a new, syncretic religious identity, one in which political loyalty and spiritual devotion are indistinguishable, and where Donald Trump himself is functionally viewed as the one chosen by God. This belief has moved from the fringe to the mainstream of the movement. It is a stunning theological mandate. A recent survey indicating that nearly 1/3 of Americans believe a Trump return to power is an expression of God's will reveals a profound shift. This is no longer just political support. It is eschatology. It is the belief that a specific political outcome is a preordained, divinely willed event. This new faith has found its cathedral, and it is the political rally. The physical and emotional boundary between a religious service and a political event has not just been blurred, it has been utterly erased. To attend one of these rallies is to witness the birth of a new ritual. The atmosphere is not one of mere political enthusiasm. It is charged with spiritual fervor. You see supporters with hands raised aloft, eyes closed, not in applause, but in supplication. They pray. They weep openly. They call his name, Trump, Trump, Trump. Not with the cadence of a simple supporter, but with the rhythmic, desperate reverence of a congregation calling upon a savior. The structure of the event itself has been meticulously transformed. The introductory music is not just a soundtrack, it functions as a hymn. The opening speakers are not just surrogates, they are preachers, warming up the congregation, bearing witness to the leader's righteousness and the wickedness of his enemies. And then, the speech itself. It is the sermon. It is a public liturgy that follows a consistent form, a declaration of grievances, recounting the sins of the opposition, the persecution of the faithful, and the decay of the nation, the fall from grace. An absolution of the faithful, reassuring the crowd that they are the true patriots, the righteous, the real Americans. A promise of redemption, the climactic declaration that I am your retribution, and the promise to make America great again. Political restoration that is understood as a spiritual one. In this new theology, Trump is the high priest of his own church. He is the central, indispensable figure through which this divine will is enacted. His followers do not see him as a perfect man, and this is a critical misunderstanding by outsiders. They are not blind to his flaws. Instead, they see him as a perfect instrument. He is the King Cyrus, the pagan king used by God to save his chosen people. He is the unholy warrior chosen for a holy task. His very vulgarity, his aggression, his willingness to shatter norms, these are not vices. They are virtues. They are proof of his authenticity, evidence that he is not one of the polished Pharisee hypocrites who led them astray, but a genuine, divinely appointed fighter sent to cleanse the temple. When a political rally becomes a church, and the candidate becomes a savior, the rules of democratic engagement cease to apply. You cannot debate a Messiah. You cannot fact-check a prophecy. You cannot compromise with a demon. The political opposition is no longer just wrong, they are evil. An election is no longer a civic choice. It is an act of spiritual warfare for the very soul of the nation. This is the ultimate realization of the power of belief discussed in Part 1. It has successfully taken politics, with all its messy compromises and facts, and elevated it into the realm of the absolute. It has created a faith where the highest virtue is loyalty, and the deepest sin is doubt. Part 5. The New Reality. When religion shapes politics, the MAGA faith, described in Part 4, is not content to remain a mere cultural or spiritual movement. It now seeks what all organized religions eventually seek: the power of the state to codify its beliefs and enforce its worldview. This is the new reality. We are witnessing the mechanisms of government being repurposed to serve the mechanisms of this new faith. Consider the proposal to establish a Religious Freedom Commission. In the language of classical democracy, religious freedom meant the pluralistic protection of all faiths and of no faith from state interference. It was a shield for the minority against the majority. But in the lexicon of this new religious politics, the term has been inverted. It is no longer a shield for all. It is a sword for one. When experts warn that this could be the end of true religious freedom, they are highlighting this inversion. They see the commission not as a protector of pluralism, but as an enforcer of a specific favored theology. It is a state apparatus designed to protect the faithful, the movement's followers, from the perceived contamination of secularism, liberalism, and competing belief systems. It is, in effect, a state-sponsored body whose purpose is to ensure that only one definition of God, one definition of patriotism, and one definition of law is protected and promoted. Freedom is redefined as the freedom of this specific faith to dominate the public square. This is the final, critical merger. Once power and belief are fully united, democracy faces its greatest and perhaps final challenge. Democracy is a political system, but it is underpinned by a fragile set of civic beliefs. It believes in process, in accountability, in the peaceful transfer of power, and in a shared, empirical reality. It is a system designed to be run by citizens who hold politicians accountable. The new reality is not based on these beliefs. It is based on a sacred belief, and this is the fundamental conflict. People are beginning to believe in a leader as they believe in a savior. A citizen can fire a politician. A disciple can only follow a savior. A citizen demands accountability from a leader. A disciple demands loyalty to a savior. A citizen can accept that their leader lost an election. A disciple cannot accept that their savior has been defeated. Any loss must be the result of betrayal, fraud, or a satanic conspiracy. When a significant portion of the electorate transitions from citizen to believer, the operating system of democracy begins to fail. The tools of democracy, debates, facts, evidence, elections, become meaningless because these tools belong to the world of politics, not the world of faith. You cannot fact-check a revelation. You cannot use a legal argument to disprove a prophecy. You cannot ask a savior to compromise with those he has defined as evil. This is the challenge. The leader, now sanctified as a chosen one, is rendered infallible. His actions are no longer political calculations. They are expressions of divine will. His opponents are no longer a loyal opposition. They are heretics. And the law is no longer a neutral arbiter. It is a tool to be wielded in a holy war. The stage, which we first examined in Part 1, is now set for its final act. The reenactment of history is complete. The lines are drawn not between left and right, but between two irreconcilable realities. One built on the secular rules of democracy, and one built on the absolute conviction of a state-sanctioned faith. Part 6. The Choice of the Aryan. The final analysis: Donald Trump may be the symbol of a new and unsettling era, but he is not its cause. He is the ultimate expression of a world where everything is for sale and everything is a show. He is the avatar of an age where belief is commercialized, packaged, branded, and sold to the highest bidder, and where politics are deified, transformed from a mere system of governance into a high-stakes battle for the nation's very soul. He is the focal point, but the great defining question of this historical moment does not lie with him. It lies with us. A figure like this cannot be created in a vacuum. A performer requires an audience. A savior requires a congregation. The deification of politics is not a unilateral act. It is a transaction. It is a tacit agreement born of a deep and desperate hunger. A hunger for certainty in an age of dizzying ambiguity. A hunger for a simple story in a world drowned in complex data. A hunger for the potent, visceral thrill of the crusade. He did not invent this hunger. He only recognized it. He understood that the rituals of democracy, the debates, the compromises, the slow, grinding work of institutional procedure, had become cold and unsatisfying. He offered something hotter, something more potent, the ritual of faith. And so we arrive at the true crossroads. When power meets faith, the problem is no longer simply who wins an election cycle. The temporary victory of a candidate or a party is a fleeting symptom. The real enduring consequence is the change that occurs within the citizenry. The true question is what set of values we, the people, have chosen to enthrone. This is the ultimate choice, and it is an internal one. It is the decision that defines the era. What will we let win in our own hearts? Will it be the allure of the absolute? The intoxicating comfort of a simple, unyielding truth? The profound, unifying joy of the revival tent, where all questions are answered, all enemies are named, and all doubt is cast out as sin? Will we choose the path of the believer, who finds relief in surrendering individual judgment to a chosen leader, who sees compromise as betrayal and opposition as heresy? Or will we choose the harder, colder, and far more demanding faith of democracy? This is the faith that has no single savior. This is the belief that a shared reality, however imperfect and painful to arrive at, is worth defending. It is the belief in the sanctity of the process, not the sanctity of the person. It is the faith that requires us to see our opponents not as demons to be exorcised, but as fellow citizens with whom we must share a nation. It is the courage to live with ambiguity, to embrace complexity, and to hold power accountable, even and especially the power we ourselves support. The theater of this era, with all its sound and fury, is merely a distraction from this one. Simple internal choice. The leader is a reflection. The rallies are a mirror. The true battle is not for the White House. It is for the empty space within the modern heart. The space once occupied by shared values, shared trust, and a shared story. The choice is not who we will follow. The choice is who we will be.